Hi everyone, it's Miriam. Today we're going to make something pretty. We're going to fluid paint a Japanese cherry blossom tree, or Sakura as it's called in Japan. And we're going to do it in a multi-layered pour. Now, when I'm going to do something like this, I make myself a quick sketch. It helps me plan out where I want everything to go, what colors I need to mix, and when I'm in the midst of actually making the painting, it kind of helps to have a guide or a bit of a blueprint in front of me too. As always, I'm going to use inexpensive craft paint to do this. And the colors we're going to need are white for clouds, pink for the blooms, a couple of browns for the body of the tree, some blues for the sky, some greens for the little hill and the background area, and maybe an aqua if we decide to add a pond. I'm still on the fence about the pond. The tools we're going to need for this are obviously cups for large quantities of paint, something to mix small quantities of paint, the ends of some paintbrushes in different sizes if you have them. And the reason I'm using these is because the ends of paintbrushes tend to be nicely rounded and smooth, and we're going to be poking a lot at this, and you don't want anything sharp since you're poking on a canvas. Now, if you're using a wooden board, then it doesn't really matter, but since I'm using a 10 by 10 canvas, I want something nice and rounded. If you have pipettes would be great for the body of the tree. And it would be awesome if you didn't have to keep taking your popsicle stick and dunking it and passing. So if you can fill one of these and paint along, that would be great. On eBay, for $1, you can get 20 to 30 of them depending on who you're ordering from. Also, you'll want some sort of pokey tool, and this is my favorite. This is an old paintbrush handle that I've sharpened one end on. It's plastic. I can wash it and use it over and over again. Alrighty, let's start pouring some paint. Okay, so I have 3 colors for the sky. Now I'm not going to do a dirty pour. I want the sky to get progressively lighter as it comes lower into the painting. So I mixed a couple of different blues that I'm going to sort of mix together. And the mix that I have going is about 2 parts paint to 4 to 5 parts Floetrol, and then I add water to taste. So depending on how thin I want the paint to be. Obviously, I don't want it to look like this, but I'll show you what we're going to do to keep that from being the case. Okay, now with the end of one of your paintbrushes or one of your Q-tips, you're going to be making lots of little X's. I know right now that sounds kind of kooky, but trust me. Just do it. So you're just making lots of little X's where two colors meet. Bring one color further down into the color below it. So your sky will have a little bit of a texture, but the colors will blend. And then bring the lighter color up into the darker color, and then do the reverse. And remember, if you're working on a canvas, you don't want to poke hard because you don't want to hurt your canvas. And if you go from this batch to this batch, wipe your tool first so that you don't bring the dark color into the light color, because that wouldn't make sense. And so after I've done that a little bit, I'm going to tilt some. And remember to coat your sides. Fill in any empty areas you may have made. You can swirl. So now your colors are starting to have less of a harsh definition. Now off camera, I mixed a little bit more of this color in case we need it. And I've added just a couple of drops of pure white paint here. Nothing has been mixed into it yet because I want you to see. And what I'm going to do now is add Floetrol to it. And I'm going to mix it maybe that much. And I'm just going to mix that really well. And this is for clouds now. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit more swirling here, and I'm using a bigger brush just to even out the mix a little bit more. And I love these little swirls that you get into the paint. It'll give the painting like a texture almost, at least a visual texture. And it doesn't need to be perfect because remember your tree is going to be here and we're also going to put clouds. So you're just trying to take away any harsh lines. Now for clouds, we've got our nice little mix here. And you want a big end for clouds, not such a fine end as I was using before. And you're going to drop your clouds wherever you think you might want a cloud. So I'm going to put one here, and then I'm going to do the same thing at first. You're going to swirl into your blue. And then wipe your brush. Oh, I forgot to mention at the beginning when I was listing tools, you want a rag to wipe your tool with. And I'm just putting little backgrounds of where I want a cloud for now. Okay, so now that I have a nice generous amount of white, I'm just going to swirl just the littlest bit on the ends, just to bring it out into the blue, the way a cloud would. You might want to trail a little bit of white out, and then round out a little bit, especially the tops. So now that you've got an idea of how this is, I'm going to finish up some clouds and I'll be back. So now I've indicated where I want my clouds to be. And with the sharper, pointier end of the stick, I'm going to do something. Now you want to be super careful when you're doing this because you're working with the canvas. So you're not going to poke at the canvas now. You're really just poking at the paint. And I'm just picking up some white on the end And this is just to line the top of the clouds. And I'm wiping after every pass so that I don't put more blue. And you want to do some little curls, some solid white curls in your cloud. That'll just give them a little bit more definition. Now I'm going to push this up out of the way, and what I'm going to do now is mix my dirty pour for this area. And I've got a couple different greens, and I'm just going to mix randomly into 1 cup. So I'm pouring a little bit of green, this green, and then I'm going to add a lighter green, all in the same cup. This is called a dirty pour if you've never done something like this. And then I'm going to add a little bit of tan just to break up the green, and a third green. This will be so that this area has a little bit of interest also. Should tan again. And then you'll also determine what greens you want to work with. You may want a very dark hill or a much lighter hill than mine. Now that all my colors are poured into the same cup, I'm just going to stir them just like that. Just 2 little cross lines crossing through the paint, and that is enough. And I am now going to pour this in the shape of the hill that I want to have. And I'm going to pinch my cup a little bit to give me a little bit of a spout. And I'm going to pour back and forth, up and down. There's going to be a little bit of tilting. The reason that I decided on a dirty pour for this was just to give this area a different texture than that area. And I think I'm going to mix a little bit more just to fill this in a little bit here. I want to darken this area up a little bit there. I am taking the stick here a little bit, and this is more to define the edge of the hill. And I'm going to mix some paint for the body of the tree, and I'll be back. All right, I've mixed a couple of browns, and if you're going to be using a pipette, you want your paint to be pretty runny. And then I'm going to refer to my drawing to remind myself of where I want my tree to go. And sort of start laying down the body. I'm only going to do it for the base because the finer parts I don't want to use the pipette for. Just for the big trunks. Okay, that's enough. The rest I'm going to do with my little pokey tool. And going to sort of draw the branches. I'm going to drag through the paint that's down here and use it to make other branches. Now don't be so concerned about any mistakes you've made in this, because your blooms will be able to hide a lot of errors. So don't panic. Like, for example, these are fatter than I want them to be, but I'm not too concerned because I have lots of flowers to put down. Kind of going by the picture a little bit, but not totally. I'm also going by how the paint landed. So I've added more branches, and now I'm going to add a little bit of light color here and there just to give the bark some texture. So that it's not just a flat brown. Since even the sky has texture, obviously the tree definitely should too. All right, I've gone ahead and mixed my pink paint, and I've picked up my biggest brush handle, and I'm just going to add a drop or two, and I just want to watch them and see how they spread. I put just straight paint, the spread is wider. I'm guessing that the more watery paint is leaching out color from the pure paint. But if I water it down a little bit with Floetrol, it's more contained, like this drop here hasn't spread. But these have spread quite a bit. So I think that maybe what needs to happen is mixing the paint to the same consistency. So, and this isn't critical. The only reason I wanted to do this was just to see how big the blooms would get so that I would determine how much paint I needed to add for each bloom. So now I'm loading the end of my brush with quite a lot of paint, and I'm letting gravity pull drops down for me. And you can do this with a Q-tip, with anything that has more of a roundish end. I don't think I'd do it with a popsicle stick. And just start putting blooms where you want blooms. Now I've decided that for this area over here, I'm not gonna do a pond. I'm just gonna let flowers fall off the tree. And so I'm gonna have some blooms that have landed on the ground and are trailing off. So having a couple on lower branches makes sense. So I'm just going to put lots of blooms and I'll be back. And I'm also going to fill in this area here with blue paint to continue this blue sky. Now I've also mixed a much lighter pink, so that all the flowers are not exactly the same color. It'll give this a little bit more texture and more depth to your clusters of flowers. Now you will decide how many blooms you want, and I've scattered some. I've made some sort of blow off the tree, a couple on the ground. And you will also now have the option of letting your blooms be round and abstract, or if you want to give them a little bit more oomph, um, cherry blossom bloom has 5 petals, I believe, but you don't have to be this precise. It's an abstract. So I'm just going to tuck these in a little bit. So all I'm doing is sort of coming in. I'll do it on this big, huge one. I'm going to come in from the outside and drag in a couple of times. And then that gives you more of a bloom definition. And then I have this dark pink over here, and I can pick up a dark drop, a very small dark drop, and then just let it hit the center. And that really gives you that cherry blossom look. So you may do that to all of them if you're really that motivated, or just a few, just to indicate that these are cherry blossoms. Now, ordinarily, if you've watched my other flower videos, I always tell you to wipe in between every stroke when you're doing this kind of thing. But for this, it's actually better if you don't wipe. Because when you're picking up the color surrounding the bloom and making your little sort of like pinches into the bloom, it actually gives them this cute little extra tendrils and almost looks like the stamens and pistils and other parts of flowers. And when I take you down for close-ups, you'll see what I mean. And just to show you how quickly I make the little X's, this is just so you know not to spend a tremendous amount of time on each one of these. I'm just really doing it super quickly. And I don't have to put the hot pink center in every single one, because some of these we might be looking at from the back where we wouldn't see that bright pink center. In looking at this, I'm realizing that I'm not loving the thickness of some of these branches. So all I have to do is come into the blue, so you're going to come at it in this motion. And I'm going to put it into the blue, push it toward the brown, and lift up. And this is the advantage of that swirly pattern we have, because none of that will look odd when we do this. And this way I can thin some of these branches. Now you have to wipe between every pass. Otherwise, you will just keep adding brown into your sky, which you don't want to do. See, I like that a lot better. And I'm going to go in the other way on this side. I'm pretty sure you get the idea. While thinning the tree, I realized I also wanted to lighten it. It seemed a little dark to me compared to the rest of the scene, you know, so I added a little bit more tan to the bark and swirled it in a little bit. And now I'm just going to kind of look it over for areas that are a little wonky. And wherever it is a little wonky, if I can't clean it up, well, guess what? I can put a bloom right there. Anywhere that has some little spot that needs a little repair, put a flower. Occasionally, a bloom spread too much and got too large. So what I ended up doing on some of them was letting that big bloom become a few blooms, more like a cluster of blooms. which is what I'm doing to this one right now, trying to make it look less out of place. So I tweaked it and added blooms for about an hour and ended up really happy with this. It was an idea I had in my head. I sketched it out and thought, yeah, that should all work. And I think it kind of did. The one thing I might change in the future is not use the pipette to paint the tree trunk. It would have worked fine for painting something like a pond if I'd added the pond, but for a thinner tree, it was overkill. Now, if I ever paint a tree on a larger canvas where I'd need the tree to be more substantial, the pipette would be a great tool, so I still recommend getting some. Plus, you can get them for $1 on eBay, and that includes shipping. Okay, enough about pipettes. As always, if you enjoyed this, please share it with your friends and social media groups. It would help me a great deal. And I truly appreciate a thumbs up. And remember to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications, because there's lots more to come, and I'd love for you to learn and play along as much as you can. Now, go let your creative nature shine. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye now.